like the whole point is to learn a system of thinking, like to learn how to analyze, how to like pick out what's happening and identify your problem, and then to implement a solution that fits your needs.
Welcome, friends, to the Modern.NET Show, the premier .NET podcast focusing entirely on the knowledge, tools, and frameworks that all .NET developers should have in their toolbox. We are the go-to podcast for .NET developers worldwide, and I am your host, Jamie GaProgMan Taylor. In this episode, Harrison Ferrone joined us to talk about his journey from being an English major to a self-taught programmer and instructional author focused on accessible tech education. Harrison also talked about his book, Learning Design Patterns with Unity, which is designed as a practical guide for video game development using well-known patterns and emphasizing the importance of quick wins in learning.
Like, we do so much work in the later parts of each chapter with like pattern variations and customizations because I want readers and students and learners to like look at the first, 70% and be like, oh, but what, oh, we're going to talk about what ifs. Fantastic. Because I have a lot of what ifs.
Anyway, without further ado, let's sit back, open up a terminal, type in .NET Podcast, and we'll dive into the core of modern .NET. So Harrison, welcome back to the show. It's been like 3 years. My goodness.
I know, it's been a while. It's been a really long time. You were approaching another milestone for like listeners in the podcast last time. I like keep coming on at these odd like milestones.
I mean, that's totally fine with me. If you want to be on the show after a milestone, that's cool.
Well, I wanted to congratulate. That's awesome. You have so many listeners, and you got the new MVP thing, didn't you? Did you get renewed?
Oh yeah. Thanks for that. Yeah. So we're for the context for the listeners, we're recording this August 8th, 2024. Only a few weeks ago, I announced that we hit over a million downloads. So thank you everyone for that. And I've been renewed as a Microsoft MVP for the third time. So yeah, getting closer and closer to that blue disc with 5 years on it.
Is it like working at Blizzard? Do you get like a different color sword every time you hit a milestone?
So no, as far as I'm aware, you get these wonderful like frosted disc things with like a year that you're made the MVP, and then when you get to 5 years, you get like a blue one, and then that says 5 years, and then when you get to 10, so it's every multiple of 5, you get one that says whatever your multiple of 5 is, so like 5, 10, 15, 20, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. But yeah, so Harrison, for the folks who perhaps haven't heard your previous appearance, which was episode 87, we're thinking this is going to be episode 156. So you're almost like double from last time.
Yeah, we're almost there.
Yeah, right. So for the folks who didn't catch that episode, I'm wondering, would you be able to sort of give everyone a bit of an elevator pitch about you and what you do, that kind of thing?
Sure. I started out as an English major. I found programming kind of halfway through that. Long time ago. Went into game development, went into iOS development, worked at that for a few years, and then I kind of stumbled into a instructional author teaching kind of path. I can't remember if it's like WWDC for the Apple conference, the yearly Apple conference. I think it was in like 2014, I think. And someone at LinkedIn was very nice and was like, if you're going to be there, would you like to, live blog? And I said, sure. And then I started making programming courses for LinkedIn, and eventually started writing books for Unity and for doing tutorials for like iOS and Swift UI and Swift programming language in general. And now I'm pretty much all in on Unity and Swift for the past few years. So there's a broad spectrum, but that's, I literally just make educational content and try and make people's lives a little bit easier. Because for the most part, even though I started programming in college, I didn't actually do very much computer science. So I still am largely self-taught. So I figured it would be a logical connection to target that audience and help people out so they didn't have to do what I did.
Oh, man. So what I often find is folks who didn't go down that academic route of taking like a comp sci degree or a software engineering degree or anything like that, when they come around to making that educational content, because they have a slightly different background to pull from, I often find that those folks are a little bit better at sort of creating that educational content, getting that idea across, because it's a case of less a case of, hey, here's the math behind why it all works and here's the theory behind it all. And it's more a case of, right, let's get you to the point where you're making something and doing something immediately, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like when you're teaching yourself, you have to get to that point very quick, don't you? Because otherwise you're not going to get anywhere, right?
Oh, yeah. You have to get those quick wins early on. Like our brains need that, hit a dopamine that's like, ooh, we made some, we created life. The program ran and printed out 10.
Yeah.
You gotta get there real quick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely agree with that.
I find that too. You can tell a lot of times, and again, I kind of wish I had done, a computer science degree because I still struggle with like algorithms. Like data structures and algorithms are not my strong suit. I keep plugging away, but like there are definite gaps in my self-taught journey, but you can sort of tell by the amount of assumptions that are in the learning content that you take. And you can usually pick out who's been self-taught and who's gone through academia, because there's a lot of assumptions with academic teaching. And there's hopefully much less with people who are self-taught because they remember what it was like to try and figure this out on their own.
Absolutely agree. I agree on the little wins, and I agree on being able to identify perhaps sometimes those folks who are self-taught because of the way that they're putting their content across. I always tell people, like, I've got a friend who's like, I want to learn, development, and I want to learn to develop a mobile app, and I want to learn game development, and I want to learn 3 different programming languages at once. And I'm like, whoa. That's fantastic. You can have all of those goals if you like, but you want to make it what you want to do is you want to make that learning journey as easy as possible by reducing the scope, right? You don't want to be trapped with you don't want to be trapped in the situation where you're like, I don't know whether it's the language that I've maybe not learned this bit, or maybe it's the tooling, or maybe it's the process, or maybe, you don't want to be confused about what's broken. I know that there's a certain subset of people when they discover software development and computer science and stuff like that, they go, oh my goodness, I'm going to install a Linux distribution, even though my course details say you have to use Windows. And I'm like, whoa. Just, I get it. Absolutely. Linux on the desktop is brilliant. But also, if you get stuck, your teachers, tutors, lecturers, whatever, whoever's designed that course won't be able to help you.
Because who's gonna help you?
Windows. Yeah, right.
Yeah, there's nowhere to go to ask for help. That actually the same thing happened in my C++ programming class when I was first getting introduced. There was a guy that was so he was whip smart at this, and you could just see his brain turning, and he got so far ahead that we couldn't help. He couldn't get any help. It's like, well, oh no, okay. Well, but you figure it out. But you're right. When you're circling back to curriculum development, you're trying to take away as many variables as possible and to teach as broadly and as, language or hardware agnostically as possible, I would say. Because if you learn, like you said, your friend could, all those disciplines that he wants to learn and build and, all the projects he probably has in his head, the bones are fairly similar if you start at the right place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like you said, it's to do with curriculum development, right? I have this background in teaching. I did out of uni, I took a direction where I was learning to teach people, right? And
okay.
And just like you're saying, right, you have to, you can assume a certain amount of knowledge or assume a certain platform that you can bounce off of to be able to provide these metaphors, to be able to provide the information. But you also have to remember that some folks aren't going to know a great deal. So you might have to sort of bring people up to speed as well. And that's a real challenge when you're making any kind of decision as to like, right, how are we both going to learn this or whatever?
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, there's a fairly simple answer. I mean, it makes it more complicated for the people making the resources. But like if you're as inclusive as possible, which basically means you have the least amount of like entry, like barriers to entry or like obstacles that someone would need to understand or to have competencies in, you end up including everyone by default, which is wonderful. It makes it harder. Again, makes it harder for you as the teacher, but it includes everybody and it doesn't leave anybody wondering anything.
Totally. Yeah, I remember back at uni. So I graduated. I often tell people I graduated in like the Triassic era, but like, but I remember one of the first few lectures at uni. I'm making furious amounts of notes, and someone turns to me and goes, "Don't you know this already?" And I'm like, "Well, thanks, dude. You just put me off of coming to this class now. Well, what are you doing?"
That would be so weird to have someone say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even know how I would be able to take that. I'd be like, no, because if we did, we wouldn't be here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused.
It's the weirdest flex ever.
Right? Did we miss something? Was this the class where you're supposed to already have taken the class?
Yeah.
And, we missed that.
Or are you not telling me that you failed it and having to take it again, right?
That's a good point. Oh, so what you're really telling me is that you've already done all the homework because you didn't pass the final last time. So we're going to be friends.
Yeah, right?
But still a weird flex. Still weird.
It really is. It really is. Oh my goodness. So that, I guess, leads us nicely onto this. You were on the show, you had a book last time. You have a new book this time. Let's talk about that, right?
Yes. So I'm trying to work my way up into like a trilogy of like, zero to hero. But like the last book, and there have been several editions since then, but the first book was very basic and like, we're going to teach you how to, program in C#, but really from scratch, but really we're going to teach you how to think programmatically and to think in systems and to think about how to put things together in a way that, makes sense and, is maintainable and flexible. And we kind of introduce, you go from like, oh, we're going to write our name all the way up to like building a simple little like Unreal Tournament kind of game. If I'm dating myself with that reference, but whatever, a little arena shooter, and it's super fun. And so I get a lot of questions because the publisher that I work with, Pact, has a Discord server for the book, and I started to get a lot of questions about a year after I released, like the 6th or 7th edition or whatever it was, and people were like, well, where do I go? Like, what do I do now? I said, well, that's a good question. I don't have a great answer for you. And I'd give people, I had a little like resource cheat sheet of like, cause like the last chapter in the book, in the old book has like, here's next steps. And I had some other ones too, if people wanted to ask for them. And I started thinking like, what would have been useful to me in university and in my first job when I was, like a junior programmer, and what would have helped me the most. And it was really easy to come up with the answer. And it was like systems design. And I was like, okay, well, that's not super helpful. Like what concrete tools would have helped me be better at my job faster? And I was like, oh, design patterns. That's easy. That's an easy answer. Design patterns and testing. And I was like, I don't really want to write a testing book right now. But maybe I will in the future. But design patterns kind of jumped out, and they do all the things, like they take like the analytical soft skills that I was trying to teach in my first book and kind of took them further and took it out into like this, kind of macro view of, whatever you're building. It can be an iOS application, it can be a game, it can be, whatever. It can be a website if you wanted. But like how to think of projects in terms of like components and systems, and how to communicate effectively, how to reuse your code, how to, I don't know, just be a more efficient programmer and like be able to have enough, I guess, competency to like have someone else look at your code and be like, oh, I see what you're doing. I got it. Like we're talking, like we can communicate. And so I started writing this design patterns book, and it took me, 2.5 years on and off. It's a monster. It's like, I don't even know. I think it's like 700 pages long. I think it's heavy. It's a good books. It's a good shelf, it's a good bookend. If you don't read it, it's fantastic at that. It just sits
Great
there.
For, flattening your dollar bills with, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or put your external laptop on there, your external screen, if you need it a little bit higher. Feel free. But yeah, so that's where that came about. And I was trying to like address all the questions of where do I go once I've got a handle on a language and I want to actually build something that works and that works well, not just like a prototype. And so that's kind of where the design patterns came in. And I love Unity so much, even, we don't have to talk about all the craziness, but I still love Unity and I still like it just because, I don't know, maybe I'm too old to change, but I've never wanted to jump ship.
Right.
So I chose that, and C#, almost everything, except for friend classes is available. And I was looking through and I was like, great, there's, maybe one book in the world written in this, kind of market. And it seems like it's missing. And it's funny, while I was writing the book, Unity started releasing these little, like these PDF books. And one of them is like, here's 5 design patterns or something that, are really, helpful. And I was like, aha, see, I see someone has found the niche. They have found the gap. And so I kind of had to speed up a little bit, but, I don't know. I always felt like the game design and development, or game programming specifically, always missed this. And like you had to learn it some mystical way, like through your job or through a mentor that if you were lucky enough to have one that would teach you these, secret arts. And yeah, so I set about, and like, I don't know, I think this was the hardest thing I've done so far, I got to say.
Oh my goodness. So I guess a couple of questions based off of that then, just for the folks who are listening.
Sorry, I rambled on. I got so excited.
No, that's cool. No, it's cool. It's all good. So for the folks who are listening in, can you tell them what the name of the book is? Because we've sort of danced around it and we haven't really said.
Yes. So it's called Learning Design Patterns with Unity. Very simple title. It's you can get it on Amazon or from Pact, and we're using Unity 2023 and C#. And yeah, it's all updated. It all works for the current version that's out right now. And let's see, we cover 19 patterns if I remember correctly. 18 patterns.
Wow.
And two bookend chapters. So
nice.
Like if anyone's ever read, there's an original book called
the Gang of Four.
Yeah, the Gang of Four. Yeah, and like elements of reusable software, object-oriented software. I can never remember the name because it's so long. But yeah, the Gang of Four, and they have 20-something patterns. And then a guy named Robert Nystrom came out. I want to say like 10 years ago, and he wrote a really, really comprehensive book about additional patterns that are specific to game programming, but it's in C++, and it's really good, but it's more on theory and like example snippets. There aren't any actual projects. So in game programming, from what I mean, this is my journey, but I've confirmed this with with loads of people. It's like everyone tries to read these two books together and somehow learn how to be a better software architect or a software engineer with games. And it's really difficult because it's hard to it's like literally trying to translate like a different language. And, some things don't work. Some things aren't directly applicable. Some things can't be one-to-one translated. And Unity is a special case, one, because it's, built on a design pattern, on component design pattern. So it's already doing its own thing, and you kind of have to learn how to get everything working. C# has its own way of working, Unity has its own way of working, and then they both work together in a third way. And this was all really, the research took the longest time, and the testing, because I wanted to make sure that like the patterns I was teaching were, you could actually like test them and be like, oh, this is how it's supposed to work, with a little tweak here, a little tweak there for the engine, that it would still be the correct content. And I hope that's what we ended up with. I mean, we'll see. It's only been out for, I think now it's 2 months, but by the time this releases, it'll be more than that. But it came out at the end of May. So basically June 1st.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. See, what I really like, and we'll circle back to the thought I was just about to have. Let's talk about the. You said there's the other design patterns book, and it's very C++y and very
that's right.
It feels like it reads. I haven't read it, so from your description, I'm inferring, right? It feels very much like it's almost like a reference manual, right? Oh, you've heard of this design pattern. Here is an example implementation, right?
Yeah, or like you definitely have to know about design patterns, because the ones he kind of puts in there are new ones. They're not in the gang. Well, most of them are not in the Gang of Four. The Gang of Four text. So yeah, it's definitely like a secondary. It's almost like an appendix just for game programmers. But it's a big book. But yeah, again, it's in C++, and if you're in Unreal, some of it will, like a lot more of it will translate. But again, even if you're in Unreal and you're in that development environment, it's not going to take into account like blueprints or any of the other components that you can use. So even if you're doing that, it's, the book is really, it leaves a lot to the reader, to kind of make the intuitive jumps into actual implementation. And that's where I think a lot of people stumble and get frustrated.
Sure. Because when you're learning, like we said at the beginning, right? When you're learning something new, you've got to make it as easy as possible to get to that quick win, right? And the entirety of your learning journey can be made up almost exclusively of quick wins. But the great thing about them is they stack. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And they stack so quickly, and stack so well. And that's how we get to like the end of a course, and you get the final exam, right? You've already done it a whole bunch of times. All you're doing now is just proving that you can recreate that thing, right? And I think that goes back to curriculum design, right? A good curriculum for learning anything, right? Learning to walk, learning math, learning English literature, learning software development with whatever programming languages. It starts with, let's go with, like you said, right? We'll start with writing your name on the screen. Right, now that you've written your name on the screen, maybe we can introduce variables and say, well, we can hard code it to say Harrison, but maybe we can have a variable that you can change to Jamie and then rerun it. And then we can change it to, I don't know, Michael and rerun it, or change it to Sarah and rerun it. And then that's teaching a little bit about variables and stuff. That's another quick win. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you need that dopamine hit of, wow, I've achieved something as fast as you can.
Right? Like, I don't know enough about neurochemistry, but like, I really feel like I get it stamped harder in my brain, like a new concept, if I get that little hit of like, ooh, that worked. Like, I feel good about that. That's why we play video games in the first place. But like, when you're learning to program, it's almost the same thing. If you can make it like that. And like each chapter. So I wrote my book. I decided not to have one project through the whole book, because it would have been very difficult to have one single project that naturally needed all the design patterns that I was teaching, because that's kind of the central point of the book, is like, they are not all applicable all the time. Right tool for the right job. So like, I couldn't think, I would have had to unnaturally, inject problems into a single game that probably wouldn't have made sense. So unfortunately, my book, or maybe fortunately, it is more of a reference book, but you can pick up any chapter. You get a white box starter project, and you have the little blocks set up. So you have a client and you have like an empty system, and your job is to build the design pattern into a workable system from scratch. And like you said, each couple of pages, you get a quick win that you're stacking until at the end you have a almost fully ready, like plug and play system to take then do whatever you want. It's not, I don't use any art assets or anything crazy, because I feel like that always clutters learning, and especially with stuff that's more intermediate or advanced. I feel like this stuff is already hard enough. Like, you don't need to be worrying about audio, like, to teach this. It's not it's not necessary. But yeah, stacking those wins is definitely the way I prefer to learn, which then makes it my preferred way to teach, I suppose.
Totally, yeah. And like, if someone's listening to this and going, no, I want to go from no code all the way to the end goal without having any quick wins in the middle, that's totally fine too, if that's how you want to do it. But I agree with you, Harrison. I'm very much a quick win type of person, right? When I'm learning a new programming language or using a new library, I'm like, right, okay, I hate the defaults, but show me how to get it running with the defaults, and then I'll go change it, right? Because once I've got it up and running, I've achieved something, right? Whereas I don't want to be sitting there for hours and hours on end just churning out code in the hopes that eventually when I hit go, it will work.
When you hit run, it'll work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the hardest thing. Like, I kept finding solutions that I would look at and be like, all right, I mean, I understand what's happening, but I don't think I could realistically, like, backward engineer explain this to someone, to a student, like, to how you got here. Like, there are a lot of missing steps, a lot of insider information, a lot of hidden choices that you made. And that was really hard.
There's only so many times when you can wave your hands and go, don't worry about this bit just yet.
Yeah, right. Like, it happens occasionally when you have dependencies, but like almost all the time that seems to be either a flaw in the understanding of the theory or the flaw in the setup or the implementation. There are very few things, at least in what I've found with like systems design, where you can't have a solitary like starting point, like almost from scratch.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about especially with systems design, right? One of the things that I never really understood at the time when I was at uni, one of the semester long courses we had to take it wasn't called systems design, but it was on systems design, and it was one of those sort of we'll almost ninja the knowledge into you, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, and I didn't get it at the time. But the lecturer wasn't even a software developer, right? We were all learning comp sci and different software development flavors, I guess. Yeah. And he was like, right then, let me talk you through how I built the fuel injection system for this airplane. And we're like, what? What's that got to do with software? Yeah. And what I didn't realize at the time was that he was talking through, right, we have a problem. We have to get the fuel from this end of the plane to that end of the plane. It can't go too fast. It can't go too slow. It has to be warmed up along the way. It can't stop, and it can't freeze or drop in temperature. We have to maintain pressure, although the outside pressure of the plane is going to drop because we're going up, and then it's going to come back up because we're coming down. And like, none of it made. I ended up passing the exam, but I was like, what has this got to do with software development? Because I just want to write code. And then actually thinking back on it over the last maybe, I don't want to say how long it is since I've graduated, but let's put it this way. If someone was born the year that I graduated, they'd be more than an adult now. But in the years since, the more and more I think about it, the more I'm going, wait, he's actually teaching design, but from outside of a software development space. And what I've actually done over the last few years with my own sort of practice and my own learning is I've been looking outside of software for ways that other people are applying the same knowledge that we have within software development, right? So it's come up a whole bunch of times on the show already. But one of the examples I give is the KonMari method for tidying up.
Sure. Yeah.
Clean code.
Doesn't spark joy. Yeah, that's literally what it, yeah, you're totally
code.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No premature optimization, no unnecessary things that you'll never need. That's genius. I never thought of that. Yeah, my wife and I read that book a couple years ago and we're like, oh, this is great.
Yep.
Here's another one. I was just looking it up. If you heard my little clickety clacks, folks, I'm so sorry. I couldn't remember the name, but it's called Thinking in Systems. It's by Donella Meadows, and it's exactly what you're talking about because the book is written for economics and like societal structures and not zoology, but what do we call that? Like ecosystems. That's what it is, and like how ecosystems function. And it's such a great it's not a super big book, but man, that just opened my eyes so much to have her talk about like, oh yeah, we introduced some wolves into the system and what happened. And like with all the systems graphs and you're like, oh, all this, like we could do this with software.
Mm-hmm. That Chaos Monkey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh, you're looking at all the connections and like the balances and counterbalances and the communicate, like the message of the stimuli being sent. If you go back far enough in software development, it's stimuli, not events.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at it and you're like, oh, I see. We're all doing the same job.
Absolutely. Everything.
I see what you're doing.
Is it everything changes, everything stays the same? Something like that?
Yeah. The more everything changes, the more everything stays the same.
That's it. The following is a paid advertisement. Did you know it's common for a business application to contain 15% repetitive code just because of metaprogramming limitations in the C# language? Why write boilerplate manually when a machine can generate it on the fly when you compile? Enter Metalama, the new metaprogramming framework for .NET. Their C# to C# template language is simply amazing. Logging, caching, memento, observability. If it's repetitive, Metalama can automate it. Visit metalama.net today and learn to automate your code patterns with their free edition. Remember, it's metalama.net with only one L. metalama.net. Oh my goodness. But what I really like from the way you've described it is using Unity as a teaching tool, right? Because, we've both said it a couple of times, those immediate quick wins and how they stack up. I'm kind of obsessed at the minute with stacking things, and I don't mean like piling things up in a I recently read Atomic Habits, which talks about habit stacking. I was at a talk a few days back at the time of recording, where someone had said about skill stacking, which is the same kind of idea. You're just taking skills from outside of your current interest and applying those into it. So this person was, as a teenager, they were into equestrian things, and they got themselves a sports coach to help with that. And then they went and worked in like the cereal industry, and then worked in like the PR industry, and then when they had a whole bunch of different industries, and when they came to start their own business, they realized, hang on, the stuff I did in the cereal industry is customer service. The stuff I did over in the PR industry is obviously PR, but it's the interpersonal skills of being able to talk to people. The stuff I did in my sports stuff with my equestrian coach, that's personal development. We can apply all of these to this one business idea. And I think that idea of taking those disparate ideas and still skill stacking them is fantastic. But that's beside the point. Let's get back to what I was actually saying. But like,
you're obsessed with stacking things.
Absolutely, yeah. What I really love about what you're saying is using the visual tool of Unity to take care of like most of the wiring up of creating a 3D environment and creating that scene and doing some of the difficult work, so that I as a reader or I as a learner can then apply the lesson you're trying to teach me and make something happen, right? I can push the button and then immediately as long as it compiles and I haven't done something silly. But then I can compare it to the code that's in the book and go, oh, right, I've missed a semicolon or whatever, right? As soon as I hit go, as long as it runs, I literally have something that not only is displaying on screen, but I can interact with. I can grab a controller and actually interact with it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of the main reasons that I chose to teach C# with Unity for like super beginners, exactly for that reason, because it's so immediate. And it's like, I feel like, you can be a visual learner and you can be, an oral learner, and, you can have all different styles of learning. But I feel like when most humans see things in motion, something clicks between like what you tried to create, and then it starts to move or it starts to work. And if you see it, something happens. Like it just happens. And you're like, oh, okay, that's wonderful. Like, give me some more of that. Like, I want more.
Absolutely.
And like, that was my approach to like the starter projects. Not all design patterns have super fun visuals behind them. Some of them do, and some of them can be applied to have those, but they're not all, applicable to like having a character run around. Some of them are for like inventory management. Some of them are for save systems that, aren't super flashy, but I still tried to make, especially with using the Unity editor tools and the components that you have accessible, like to build out levels of abstraction that lets you get your hands in it, like you said, that like make you be able to go and change things and to see it in action as you're testing or something like that. Because that really does seem to bring systems alive. If it's not immediately apparent, it's like, oh, somebody did a really cool combo. Like, there are a few design patterns that do that, but that's not the prevailing use case, I would say.
Right. Okay, yeah, and that immediate feedback is, we keep talking about it, right? The immediate feedback is incredibly important, and especially if you're just like reading through a physical book, right? You're working your way through a book, you maybe got it open on your desk, you've got your laptop open, and you're leaning across it, and you're like, I'm going to type this thing in, and then I'm going to hit go, and the book's fun to read, but I can't say, oh wait, hang on, it's happening, right? You can't beat that, right?
No,
I get the feeling.
No,
that,
you really can't.
It must be similar to like in maybe the film industry, right? Because you can see as soon as you finish editing something, you don't even have to edit the whole thing. As soon as maybe now with visual tools, you can see it as you're editing, right? But you're seeing it happen in real time. And, you can't beat that, right? Because like when I started my programming adventures as a kid, it was with BASIC, and we were on like a green screen, right? The screen was black with green text, and there was no visual anything, no visual feedback. You would sit and type for hours, you'd hit go, and it wouldn't work, right? And then you'd be like, I don't understand, right? But because it was,
you got nothing.
Yeah, and because it was ephemeral, as soon as you hit go, it would start interpreting it because it was BASIC. If it didn't work, or when you dropped out, that code listing didn't exist anymore. You have to type it all back in again.
Oh God.
Yeah, right.
See, that's the thing. It's almost like the mental equivalent of like doing martial arts or sports or something. You get that like agency where it's not physical. It's like, ooh, something came out of my brain and made something happen, instead of like, oh, my hand, put the ball through the hoop.
Yeah.
But there's still something very visceral about that. And like, this was one of the harder challenges to balance, was like, who was I writing the book for? Because at some point skill level and competency comes into the equation when you're trying to like get those moments to people, to like the right people that you're trying to get them to, right? And it was a weird balance between like, well, I'm going to write this for people that know a little bit, like that know enough C# to hurt themselves, and a little bit of Unity, and that's about all you need. Like, you could even start this just from a purely like, I don't know anything about this, but I want to understand how systems work, because like, we're not starting, like, everything is provided. Like, you don't have to imagine, there's no hidden steps.
Right.
So I mean, that wouldn't be the ideal target, but you could totally do that. But I wrote it mostly for people that are coming from C# or some kind of object-oriented language, and Unity is kind of like the visual, I don't know, the sugar, the flavor for what we're doing. Because most of the code in the book, I'd say even probably above 90% could be taken to any other C# application in like .NET if you were working with object-oriented systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's an important lesson for folks to learn, especially if they're in the early part of their journey, is that you can take the knowledge, right? I could possibly teach someone, say, a builder pattern, right? But if they, depending on where they are in their personal journey of how I'm learning about the way I learn, they may go, cool, I will learn this and be able to repeat that code exactly as it is. And that's fine. But the problem is that it's not always going to fit the actual problem you're trying to solve, right? That maybe you're using a different class name or whatever, right? But having a visual tool that you can actually run it and then go, oh, cool. Yeah, so I know enough C#. Why don't I, and this, I'm not saying this is in the book. I'm not going to ask you if this is in the book. Why don't I try and recreate this pattern somewhere else in something completely different, right? Because that's the key thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, I spend so much time drilling that in the book. It's like the whole point is to learn a system of thinking, like to learn how to analyze, how to like pick out what's happening and identify your problem, and then to implement a solution that fits your needs, like the reader's needs, not your needs. Like we do so much work in the later parts of each chapter with like pattern variations and customizations, because I want readers and students and learners to like look at the first, 70% and be like, oh, but what, we're going to talk about what ifs. Fantastic. Cause I have a lot of what ifs. Like the what ifs are what I feel like that's where the real skill or the real tool is learned, that you can like take into anything else you're going to do with software engineering. Right.
So you talked about how there's, I think you said around, now I may be misremembering because we've talked about a lot of stuff so far. So I apologize everyone who's listening, but I think you said something around 20, no.
And yeah, there's like 18 more or less evenly split between the three.
Right.
And then, that's only about 60%, because there's 34, I think, with the Gang of Four and the game programming pattern book combined.
Right. And I think that's an important lesson for anyone who's learning anything, right? There's a quote that I use in any of the talks that I do, and it's Yamaoka Teshu, and he says, what is it? Do not think that this is all there is. Wonderful teachings exist. The sword is unfathomable, right? Just because you're learning this small part of something doesn't mean that that's all there is to learn. And that isn't meant to put anyone off. It's meant to say, hey, these are some of the things you might need. But also you can then use the knowledge you've learned learning these things to help you learn those other things faster.
Right. I think that's actually more of a positive, like, ooh, let's get up and go. Because if you can't ever learn everything, then the simple act of trying, you win. You win by continuing to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I like that. I like that there's no like gatekeeping with that.
Yeah.
Like, learn it this way or you fail.
Oh, I hate that.
Yeah. I'm like, no. I mean, if I could take up an extra page every chapter, I'd be like, and this is not the only way to do it. All of this could be, you could bin the entire thing and start over from something else. And it would still, if it addresses the problem with similar or the same results, wonderful. You did it. Congratulations. Like, you don't have to use exactly what we do in the book.
Absolutely. let's not worry about which design patterns are in the book, but I like the idea that there's the 3 different types of design patterns. So can you talk real quick about the different, I guess, some of the different types of design patterns that you've chosen, and then how you've categorized them? Like, are they categorized based on like how other people categorize them, or is this the this is the Harrison way of categorizing them?
That's fair. They are categorized. The main ones are categorized according to the Game of 4 because it's a very good metric. They have a very good idea of what goes where. And the additional game programming ones, some of them were categorized, some of them were not. Some of them were in different new categories. I put them where I thought they would best fit. So, for example, like creational deals with problems arising from object creation and how to do that more efficiently in a variety of scenarios. Behavioral is how to have usually, how to achieve different behaviors without having crazy unmaintainable code in different situations. And structural, again, is, you can think about this, it's the bones of these design patterns are more like the bones of certain systems that make usually communication, but sometimes behavior and data sharing work more efficiently. And there are a couple, like the ones from the game programming patterns that were in new ones. So for instance, like object pooling, you could call that an optimization pattern, but it is, it's also a creational pattern. You're dealing with lots of objects being created in your memory and how to manage them effectively. So things like that, like I don't quibble about that minute kind of theory, because that doesn't help anyone learn the skill. But, I put things where I thought they would be most understandable, but for the most part, it's the theory behind everything is still back to the Game of 4. Cause I'm not trying to beat that or rewrite that. Like it's very usable and it's very, it's very well researched and it's lasted so long and it's helped so many people make better software. But on the flip side, it is really dry. It's really dense. It's very hard to, it takes multiple rereads and again, if you're lucky enough to have a mentor, you take it to them and be like, yeah, I don't understand what's happening. And if you don't have those things, that a book like that can seem like it's not accessible.
Yeah.
And that really got me. I don't want that to happen. This stuff is really useful.
Yeah, sure. A couple of thoughts on that then. So first one, I guess, if from my perspective, and I haven't read the book, folks. I've not read it, but it's on my list. If your design patterns are organized similarly to the ones in, say, the Gang of Four, then if folks graduate from your book to the Gang of Four, they're going to go, oh, wait, I remember this one because Harrison taught me this one. And then they're going to see a slightly different way of implementing it, but it'll also be categorized the same way, right? So it's like everybody wins.
Yeah, exactly. Again, the tools are the same. The underlying material is all the same. Mm-hmm. It's just the veneer that's a little bit different. The nails are different. The hammer's not different. Nails are a little different. The wood's a little different. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's a good point. I would encourage people to start with something like mine and then graduate, like you said, and go read Game of 4 and go read game programming patterns, because it'll fill in more of those what if gaps on a more advanced level, and you won't be starting from scratch. I feel like those books missed, there was a primer missing, and I tried to write the primer for that.
Yep. I remember when I tried to read, the first time I tried to read Gang of Four, I was very early in my career and hadn't really gotten the idea of design patterns. And so I'm reading this book going, it's not even in a programming language that I use. How am I supposed to learn this?
Yeah. That is one of the fundamental things that is difficult with learning this level of skill, because I don't think systems design is easy by any means, but it is a core competency that people should have early on. So it's a weird, like it's a weird double think. Like, oh, it's really hard, but I should learn it early.
Yeah.
When I may not be able to fully grasp it. I still maintain that you should do that because you'll be farther ahead either way.
Totally.
But yeah, like, I can kind of, I can read C++. I can understand what's happening, but even for me, it was difficult. And like the lack of, complete projects where you could reach out and touch them and like try and break it apart and put it back together, like an old watch. Like, oh, I want to see how it works. Not that it works, but how, and can I replicate it?
Sure.
Because that's how, we talked about that a bunch. That's how we learn.
If you're enjoying this show, would you mind sharing it with a friend or colleague? Check out Podcatcher for a link to the show notes, which has an embedded player within it and a transcription and all that stuff, and share that link with them. I'd really appreciate it if you could indeed share the show. But if you'd like a few other ways to support it, you could leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. So if you head over to .netcore.show/review, you'll find loads of ways to do that. You could consider buying the show a coffee. The Buy Me a Coffee link is available on each show's show notes page on the website. This is a one-off financial support option. You could become a patron. This is a monthly subscription-based financial support option, and the link to that is included on each episode's show notes page as well. I'd love it if you could share the show with a friend or colleague, or leave a rating or review. The other options are completely up to you, and are not required at all to continue enjoying the show. Anyway, let's get back to it. Yeah, exactly, right? Like looking at the page and it showing me a factory pattern written in whatever language I don't use isn't as useful as here is a factory pattern in the language that you use so you can implement it yourself and then tear it to pieces, like you said, and figure out how it works and change something and see if that works and then understand why that pattern exists and what problems it can help to solve. And then I guess if folks are reading your book and they can recognize the patterns and recognize how these patterns are built up, then if they do graduate up to the Gang of Four, they can look at your implementation of, say, I'm going to use factory pattern again because I just said it. They can look at your factory pattern implementation. They can look at the Gang of Four factory pattern and go, oh, I see how these languages map to each other. So when I look at the options pattern or the visitor pattern, wait, I get this now. So line 1 in Harrison's pattern mapped to line 4 on the original whatever, and then I can then start to make inferences about how the languages are working, and maybe I can take a whack at re-implementing one of the Gang of Four patterns in my chosen language, C#, whatever, because I have a little bit of background knowledge. It's like how people translated old texts, right?
I was going to say it's like a Rosetta Stone for going back to this. Yeah, 100%. And like that's why I chose the patterns I did to include, because the ones, for the most part, the ones that I left out are familiar enough once you get through the ones that I've been teaching that you can jump in and be like, oh, I see what we're doing. This is this pattern, but with a little bit of a twist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like that's kind of the reasoning for like what didn't make the cut, in this volume.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Okay. So I guess just before we drop off then, I think you answered this one earlier, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. So this can be read by someone who is like early in their career. They know a little bit about C#, a little bit about Unity, or maybe just some about one or the other, as long as they're willing to hit like road bumps along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like everything starts very basic. You really, you don't need very much specialized C# knowledge. The few places that you do, I either explain what you need to know or show you where to get it. So really like, a few months in of playing around with, really getting to know C#, you don't have to be, much more than a beginner intermediate level. You'll still get something out of the book. Likewise, if you're more heavily on the Unity UI side of things and you've been doing everything in the editor, totally fine. You'll still be okay. And if you're straight up just C# and you've never used Unity, like all you really need is to watch one of, Unity Learns, which is their learning platform. You really just need to watch like their quick video on like how to use the editor. Because everything else, like if you learn how to use the editor and sort of conceptually understand what scriptable objects are, that's it. Like everything else, we build up block by block. And everything, all the starter projects are on a GitHub, on GitHub. So you can you download the whole thing. You start each chapter with a new project, with a new problem. Every chapter, the problem is framed as like, how would you implement, such and such game mechanic? But really it's how would you solve this problem? If you were told, as a junior developer, hey, I need this new feature implemented. And then you think to yourself, oh, okay, well, what do I do? Where do I start? So that's how every chapter starts, is like this, kind of made up feature task from, your dev lead or something. Here, go do this. And then we start. Right.
And I guess, and this is me just extrapolating and guessing something, right? One of the things, because you'd said earlier on about, I chose Unity. I'm happy with Unity. This is one that I really like. Let's not talk about the weird licensing stuff that happened, because if you're reading this book, you're probably not going to be publishing a game at the end of it. You're reading this one to learn, right? So, yeah. But you're learning how to use the tools. You're learning how to use the language. You're learning how to produce some stuff. Yeah. And I feel, because I've played around with Unity, I've played around with Godot or Godot, or however you're supposed to pronounce it.
Yeah, I say Godot, but I don't.
Yeah, right. Who knows, right? And then, like, I've played around with a few of the others, the free versions of a few of the others. But I'll tell you something, right? As someone who knows nothing about these things, they all look and behave quite similarly. So if you're happy with using Unity, you're already 2 steps ahead of someone who hasn't used Unity, and then some, because you'll be able to perhaps transfer this knowledge over to Godot, however we're pronouncing it, maybe even Unreal if you can get a license for that or whatever, right? It's not like these tools are all designed differently. They're kind of all they're all solving.
They're all right? Yeah, exactly. And the learning curve for each one to get to the stage you need to start learning this material is very small. Like it's not very steep at all. And even the learning is kind of a system in itself. It's like abstracted, right? Like what we really want to teach is how to think like an object-oriented, engineer. And then we go, oh, well, how do we do that in this specific language? Ooh, how do we do this in 3D? Ooh, how do we do this in Unity components? But the top level is really the most important one. Is like, how do I learn these analytical skills to be a better engineer? Again, the one caveat is that this is all object oriented. So keep that in mind. But 85, 90% of these skills are directly transferable to any other object oriented framework or problem, I guess would be the better word, like a problem area that you're trying to solve. Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing that like I focus on when I'm trying to teach. I don't want you to get pigeonholed into, some crazy dogmatic version or viewpoint about, what you're learning. And then, you're so narrow and you're so inflexible that you can never grow. So it's a hard line to walk, but anyone can pick this book up after, a few, 2 or 3 months of C# programming or Unity, just bopping around their tutorials or whatever, as long as you are curious about how systems work. I mean, that's the main thing, isn't it? If you're curious or not.
Cool. Okay. So, let's say someone's listening along and thinking, wait, I didn't write down the name of the book. Give me the name of the book again.
All right. So it's Learning Design Patterns with Unity. It's the only one on anywhere. You can get it from Amazon or Pact. One or the other is honestly usually having a sale at some time. So grab it. We do, like I said at the beginning, we do have Discord servers for all our Unity content, which is great. So Pact has actually a pretty solid offering for Unity. So all the authors are on the servers. You can ask any question to any of the authors or any of the mods about whatever book you're following along with. And, it's kind of just a nice place to post ongoing work and where you go from there and kind of just share. I mean, it's Discord, so it's community driven, but I'm on there most every day, and you get the server invite from the ebook or the print copy or both, whichever way you grab it. So definitely don't leave out that step, because that, especially with this kind of content, it's important to talk about it, to like have your stuff almost, peer reviewed in a nice way to make sure that it's getting through.
And you also have a server full of people who are likely could be mentors as well, right? Oh, I need some help with this. I'm a bit stuck. Oh, well, let's jump on a session and we'll work on it together. We'll pair program it or whatever.
Right. The community aspect kind of surprised me because, a lot of the times now, because it's years and years later, a lot of the times because of time difference, I'll be asleep, and by the time I get up and look at look at someone's question or a problem, somebody else will have jumped in, like some other learner, and been like, "Oh, I ran into this. This is how they're like solving each other's problems," which is wonderful. Like everyone's kind of learning by doing.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting because that's almost the exact same feeling that a fellow author of yours, Mark J. Price, had said that he's on there, he's helping out, but other people will jump in and help out as well.
Yeah, it seems to be like that there's, after a certain number of people join and are involved, you get to this line where it just explodes. Like there's so many eyes on it that somebody will help, which is great. Yeah. Oh man, Mark just released his awesome tools and services, or tools and tricks, right, for C#. His books are great.
They really are.
Right.
Amazing. Okay, so someone's listening in. They're like, "This is amazing. I've got a question for Harrison. Is there a way for folks to get in touch?"
Yeah, I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm the only Harrison Ferrone, Ferrone. You can inbox me or DM me or whatever it's called on LinkedIn anytime. That's the main way, or through Discord. Those are my only two kind of social media hooks that I have. Right.
Yeah, I totally get that. I went through a period during the time when everyone was sent home, shall we say. I don't like to talk about that period. Yeah. During that period of time.
The dark time.
That's it, right? I actually went through all of my socials and was like, am I actually using this? Do I have the time? Even though I've got nothing to do with it at this moment in time, do I even have the time that is required to keep this up and going? No, I don't. Yeah. It's gone.
And gone. No, I probably have a Twitter and an Insta somewhere for programming, but I honestly couldn't tell you what they are. I focus on Discord, and through LinkedIn, it keeps it easy. Keeps everyone in one place, and I'm much more likely to see any of your wonderful questions.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, cool. Well, Harrison, it's been a wonderful conversation with you. I absolutely love these conversations, and thanks
so much for having me on again.
Hey, no worries. You're always welcome on the show. Just get in touch, and we can talk more Unity. We can talk education. We can talk development. We can talk whatever you want.
Oh man, that would be a fun one, because I feel like the Unity's taken kind of a hit. So, but it's such they've really put. I mean, this isn't just recently, but like they've always put a lot of their backing into their educational content, and I like that. Like maybe that's why I keep using them, because I always see them trying to make that better,
right? And
like useful for not who they think their audience is, but for their actual audience.
Yeah,
I think that's an important distinction. So, oh man, I talk Unity and curriculum development all day. Do something.
Absolutely. Maybe you, me, and Mark can do an episode.
Oh, that'd be awesome, because his books are very like mine. Just like with, like his are so nitty gritty. Like with like like each little piece is so important to learn, and like I think that's wonderful. But like his books are massive, and he's got so many. So. Oh yeah, I'd love that. That'd be good fun.
Well, there you go.
That'd be
Right,
good
we've
fun.
said it now, and it's on an episode, so maybe it's going to happen. Amazing.
Mark, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't message you before this. I should have.
Well, look, all right, for the listeners who've gotten this far, we talked about it just before we hit record. Well, let's just freeform jazz this, and we freeform jazzed it, and we come out with, we've got a trio for the next one.
Oh, that'll be good. All right.
Amazing.
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah. Well, thank you ever so much, Harrison. I've really enjoyed this recording, this episode. So
Oh, me too.
amazing. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Modern.net Show with me, Jamie Taylor. I'd like to thank this episode's guest for graciously sharing their time, expertise, and knowledge with us. Be sure to check out the show notes for a bunch of links to some of the stuff that we covered and a full transcription of the interview. The show notes, as always, can be found at the podcast's website, and there'll be a link directly to them in your podcatcher. And don't forget to spread the word. Leave a rating or review on your podcatcher of choice. Head over to .netcore.show/review for ways to do that. Reach out via our contact page at .netcore.show/contact, or join our Discord server at .netcore.show/discord, all of which are linked in the show notes. But above all, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I hope that I'll see you again next time for some more .NET goodness. I'll see you again real soon. See you later, folks.